Vince, with that, you want to do some rapid fire?
It's what I'm here for, baby. Let's do this. You've got some interesting ones today that I'm not exactly sure which direction I'm going to go on some of it.
Excuse me. I thought so myself. I thought
just go in there.
I said, I try. I try to keep it interesting.
And you do.
Stewart Mandel of The Athletic says if he had the ability to change the conference affiliations of 5 teams, this is what he would do. 1, move Clemson to the SEC. 2, move BYU to the Pac-12. 3, move Maryland back to the ACC. 4, move Louisville to the Big 12. Before I tell you what number 5, he did say that because like Texas, Oklahoma, USC, UCLA are getting ready to move, he eliminated them from his possibilities. But what do you think number 5 is? Someone's got to be able to guess it.
Everybody knows what it is.
You got it right. He says that he would move Notre Dame to the Big Ten. And let me see if I can find my note here on this. I'll read you what his explanation is. I mean, it's not ground shattering. He says, Notre Dame to the Big Ten. I'm sorry Fielding Yost was mean to you 100 years ago, Domers. Get over it. Why be half in with the ACC, which pads your schedule annually with the Virginia Techs and Pitts, when you could annually be playing nearby old rivals like Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue? So, Vince, just go. Tell me.
So typical. Like, we can have an educated conversation about the other 4. We can. And I would have no problem with that. And in fact, we can do that a little bit if you would like. But it's such clickbait to put Notre Dame to the Big Ten. It totally takes the air out of the entire article to me because he wants clicks. And so he's going to put the headlines, Notre Dame to the Big Ten, or whatever, so that people read his article. If he didn't have Notre Dame to the Big Ten, not as many people are going to click on the article, even though it's nonsense. And everything else that he put in there, whether he put thought into it or not, right? They're going to be totally glossed over, and everybody's going to focus on Notre Dame to the Big Ten. If you had something good to say, leave the Notre Dame part out of it, and let's discuss that.
Which the other ones, I think that there's merit to some of them.
Sure.
Well, let's address the Notre Dame thing first, though, because what problem does that solve?
Right.
What problem does that solve for anybody? Like, as it is right now, the college football playoff is completely happy to have Notre Dame without being in a conference.
Mm-hmm.
What does Notre Dame joining the Big Ten accomplish? All he says is it gets you out of playing a watered down schedule against the ACC, and it gets you playing, some more regional rivalries. Well, who's to say you can't do both? Because we were just talking about that yesterday, about how if Notre Dame re-ups with NBC because of NBC's new agreement with the Big Ten, that more Big Ten schools might be coming. And oh, by the way, they played Ohio State last year. They played Ohio State this year. They played Wisconsin 2 years ago, and they were obviously supposed to play another. Yeah, they're playing Purdue. They're playing Big Ten teams.
Right.
So what does this accomplish? And all you potentially get is a little bit better, higher end in terms of competition. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. You're not going to, USC obviously now as well. You're not going to play them every year though, because it's, the way the Big Ten is doing the schedule. So what does this accomplish, and what problem is it solving? And if you're Notre Dame, how does it benefit Notre Dame? Like I've said this a million times. The only people you hear about complaining about Notre Dame, not being in a conference or going to the Big Ten are people outside of Notre Dame who just for whatever reason insist that they need to be in a conference. It accomplishes nothing. Notre Dame,
right,
like with the schedule that they have right now, we've been through it with the ACC, and then you go out, you schedule an Ohio State. You're going to have USC on the schedule every year. It gives them a chance to play other Power 5 teams and also have a chance to be in the college football playoff at the end of the season. Why would they want to change that?
Right. And this is where I'm at here with Stymie, because Indiana, Minnesota, and Maryland are much better competition. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yes, okay, the very top
Again,
of the Big Ten.
the higher end would be better. There's better depth at the
Sure.
high end, than you have in the ACC with basically Clemson and maybe Florida State right now, and then
Right.
a team or two every other year. That again, better depth at the top of the conference. But what does that accomplish for Notre Dame?
Right.
Again, if the goal is to be in the college football playoff, how does that benefit Notre Dame by playing those teams?
Right. It's exactly right. It just, I don't know. Like right now, Notre Dame is fine exactly where they are. They're not blocked from the national championship game. They're having no problem putting a schedule together. There's no benefit to Notre Dame going to the Big Ten. And everybody's going to say, well, they can get $100 million a year if they go to the Big Ten. They're going to get plenty of money, and they're not exactly sitting on the corner with the cup out looking for loose change.
And the other thing is, once they get into the college football playoff, if they were in a conference, they've got to share part of that revenue with the conference. They don't have to share that money when they're Notre Dame. They get to keep that money. Their share, share is their share. They don't have to share it with the conference. So that's like a hidden benefit. So again, even though you're not getting what the Big Ten or the SEC are getting in a TV contract, as long as you make the playoff, you're going to get a big chunk of TV revenue at the end of that thing.
That's all yours that you don't have. That's a really good point that I hadn't even thought about. It's like I knew it, but I didn't process that. I love where's the bell? Bing. Oh, by the way, I'm moving into a new office at school, and in the cabinet is a bell.
Nice.
I'm grabbing it. Nice. It's going to be a new addition to the show.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thought about you immediately.
So these other suggestions
we can roll through them. I mean, look, Clemson.
I mean, we don't have to talk about them. I think Clemson would like to go because of the revenue. Here's the bigger, Louisville to the Big 12 makes sense. Big 12 could have had Louisville 10 years ago before they ever joined the ACC, but the Big 10 the Big 12 dropped the ball and didn't get them in, and now they're wishing they had Louisville. It's all like Maryland to the ACC makes sense, but it's not going to happen because of the disparity in revenue now. There's no incentive. Here's what I think the ACC should have. If we talk about what schools would we see make a move, what if the ACC could entice, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, maybe an Auburn to join up with them. Because again, I realize the TV contract is bad right now, but if you get a couple teams with some teeth, then all of a sudden you're going to renegotiate that contract with ESPN. Everyone keeps talking about, it's got to be Notre Dame. What if you went out and, I don't know how important being in the SEC is to Georgia, but for any of those teams, Georgia's already won 2 championships. You go to the ACC, the path to get there, you don't have to go through Alabama and LSU and Tennessee. Maybe you can give some incentive to get some teams to actually go to the ACC.
Yeah,
I realize it's probably a pipe dream, but I'd at least be trying for it right now.
Because of the money situation, it's a pipe dream. I mean, the SEC is going to get a ton of money, and it's going to pale. I mean, the ACC money pales in comparison to.
Well, and again, at the very
SEC
least,
money.
If you could get the right teams, small handful of teams
Good call.
that.
Yeah.
At the very least, you would be able to renegotiate it. That's where ESPN would rip that deal up. Now, if Notre Dame joined, ESPN would rip it up, but
for sure. I mean, like I said, I still think the thought experiment of Notre Dame going out and starting their own conference is riveting. It's absolutely riveting to me in my own head on who they could just pluck out of all the Power 5 conferences, go get 2 or 3 teams from each conference and just say, ha, here it is, the nationwide conference. Let's go. I think that they could do it. If they wanted to flex their muscle, I think that they could do it because they could get a TV deal that would match or rival any of the TV deals that are out there right now.
Yeah. I mean, how about this, Michael Johnson, Penn State, Maryland to the ACC? I mean, that would.
Maryland belongs more in the ACC than they do the Big Ten.
Absolutely. I mean, they're on the freaking East Coast. They're they're right there.
Right.
Not the heart necessarily of ACC country, but they're right there. They're one of the original members, I believe. So,
and Penn State never made sense in the Big Ten. And it still doesn't and look at the protected rivalries that the Big Ten just came out with. Didn't Penn State have 0? They've been in the Big Ten for 3 decades. They don't have any rivals.
Right.
What does that tell you?
Right.
I think they'd leave in a heartbeat.
Stewart Mandel talked about BYU to the Pac-12, and again, that's something that I think, especially because Utah's already there, should have happened. But
sure, I could absolutely see that.
It never happened, so they're going to the Big 12. There's been all this talk about Colorado going back to the Big 12. How about Nebraska? Because the Big 10 has not worked out for Nebraska, and the reason that they left the Big 12 to begin with to go to the Big 10 is because all the power that Texas wielded in the conference, and Texas is gone now. If you're Nebraska, go back to the Big 12, get Colorado to come with you. That was one of the best football rivalries of the 90s when Colorado and Nebraska were both good, in that conference specifically, but even nationally, because they were both nationally ranked there for a while. Like, get both of those teams back to the Big 12. I mean, that could, I'd rather see that than USF or UCF and
absolutely
some of these others.
Yep. No, I agree with that completely.
What about Boise State? Like, I'm surprised. Haven't seen, Boise State has just kind of been lost in all this. You haven't heard.
I wonder, like, okay, so we all know Boise State football, and I have to think they've been approached by Power Fives in the past. But I wonder how the rest of the teams for Boise State stack up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that does.
And I think that's had a big. I think that's had a big part in why. They've never gone anywhere.
Right. Yeah. And they do a good job of kind of being that upstart, underdog kind of thing. It would be interesting to see them in a conference where they're playing Power 5 teams all the time. I just don't know that they could sustain that. You know what I mean? I could be wrong, but I just don't know that the entire package of Boise State is appealing enough to Power 5 conferences right now.
Chi-Town says that blue turf is awful, which I don't disagree with, but
more ducks.
When you turn on your TV, you know whose fields you're watching, I guess. John A1, Maryland, Penn State, West Virginia, Syracuse, Pitt, Temple, UConn, BC should bring back the Big East. The Big East made its play into football, and
it
they
didn't
just
work out.
that's why everything went the way it did.
Right. No, absolutely. And the Big East is now officially a basketball conference. Like, they have completely isolated themselves away from football. That's for darn sure. So, I mean, it's a good basketball conference, actually. Right. It's actually a really good basketball conference.
UConn just won the championship, not long after going back to the Big East.
And I just took a college visit with my son to Xavier University over in Cincinnati, and their basketball arena is beautiful. It makes Notre Dame look like a dump.
Right. Chi-Town says the Big East still exists. Yes, it still exists in basketball, but we're saying football. They decided football was not going to be the way they were going to go. And that's why, they got all the Catholic schools together, which I think was a good strategy.
I do too.
I do too. Forged an existence, even though football is still big revenue. They found a way to keep the conference alive by, again, just redirecting the emphasis, get away from the football and go all in on basketball. I think it's been a good strategy.
Which is how the Big East got their name in the first place. I mean, how about the Big East in the 80s? You know what I mean? Like, that was the basketball conference, and that was the Big East was a lot of fun. When Notre Dame first joined the Big East in basketball, man, that was a conference, man.
Yes. So we talked earlier this week about the most frustrated we've been watching Notre Dame football. Ryan Splenda said this about his Notre Dame football watching. I believe this came from Twitter.
I remember seeing this.
He said, "I'm constantly frustrated watching ND football. Whether good or bad, I overanalyze everything. It's kind of a family curse. I love ND football, but it is very rarely enjoyable." My question, Vince, do you have this experience watching Notre Dame or any other team that you're a fan of?
I used to. I used to have this experience watching Notre Dame football before I met you. Now,
I toned it down.
Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, now it's a job, so it's my job to analyze, obviously. I don't think I overanalyze, and it has not gotten to the point in my viewing pleasure, whether I'm watching Notre Dame basketball, for example, or I'm watching the Cubs or the Bears or whatever. Like, watching sports used to ruin my day if something bad would happen. That's just not the case anymore. Maybe that was with age, I don't know, or just experience and doing these things, and how if the Cubs lose, my life hasn't changed any, that kind of a
Right.
thing.
Right.
But I'm not the kind, like, in the moment, I can get very frustrated. Like, people watched me live watching the USC game, right? I can get very frustrated in the moment or very excited in the moment. Once the game is over and we've done the post-game show, or if it's not a working thing, and once the game is over, like, I'm good. Like, it does not affect me like it affects Ryan here. That's definitely not the case for me at all.
I agree. Like I told my story, about that Michigan State game long ago, and that was the turning point for me where I really, found out that I had to dial it down quite a bit if to be able to give as objective as possible analysis, to talk about it as objectively as possible, to try to had to remove some of that emotion. I get most like that watching the Cowboys, but not even in the regular season. For me, it's once they get to the playoffs, when it's like, okay, you've done this to me. How many, they've got 4 playoff wins since winning Super Bowl 30, like 2 months after Jesse was born in 1996. They've got 4 playoff wins since then.
That's true.
You've got to the playoffs plenty of times. Now it's like, now there's actual expectations. That's when it becomes much less enjoyable to watch, when
Makes sense.
when there's something on the line.
So as a Bears fan, I don't have to worry about that. So at least not recently, about them winning in the playoffs, because they don't make the playoffs, which is why, they are up for Hard Knocks. So
see, and that's why it's like it's like getting to do play-by-play is so fun, because like you can invest some of your emotion, like
absolutely
into the calls, and you can also, like you sort of intentionally have to redirect some of that stuff, good and bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can still have fun with it in the meantime. But yeah, so
no doubt.
It's interesting. I was curious kind of where you stood on that.
I will say, my emotions watching a game have been completely almost shut out because of sitting in the press box. I'm sitting in the stands watching a game. I just sit there.
It's funny. I was thinking about this because remember when, the old press box, when we were on the other side of the stadium before they, did all the additions and stuff like that over there. There, you always heard the no cheering. This is a working press box. Please, no cheering. But, like you would hear now and then little jabs by national media about, all these Notre Dame fan media and stuff like that. It wasn't because members of the like the Notre Dame beat were cheering. It's because they let sponsors and
fans,
those and
literally fans up there,
fans and alums in there, and they would go crazy at times. And there was like 1 or 2 guys in particular who you would hear all the time. So they were always making that announcement. But it's like, you can't say it's a working press box if you're letting paying fans who are liquored up, some of them, in there watching the game and are going to do whatever. But that has changed quite a bit since we've moved to the other side, and they've
got the
removed
luxury
that from the actual working press box area.
Yeah, they've got luxury boxes and places that they can put those fans, and haven't had that issue in the last few years. You're right. I didn't even think about that. We haven't had that announcement about this is a working press box, no cheering, whatever. But it's totally taken away my outward cheering for the most part when I'm sitting watching a game, like in the stands or even at my house. I get real excited inside, but my outside emotions just don't exist anymore for the most part.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Michigan has lost in the college football playoffs the last 2 years, in the semifinals the last 2 years.
Now, see, I'm split on this because I was obviously actively rooting against Michigan. Actively, right? But they got there, which means they've been successful. So it's like it's a kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like they got there, they beat Ohio State the last 2 years, huge feather in their cap, obviously. But man, I was rooting hard for them to lose. And it's fantastic that they lost, which means they're not playing for a national championship. So I mean, that part is awesome. The part where they're good enough to get there is the problem I have. And hopefully that is going to go the other direction.
See, I just think, and I agree. Like, if you want to, I left this open-ended, obviously, to see what you would say, and you were actually much more pleasant, considering how much you hate Michigan. I started thinking about this. I just feel like it is very underplayed and not talked about enough that they lost in the playoff. Because again, like sitting here from a Notre Dame side, that's all Notre Dame hears is like,
You're right.
Well, you got to the playoff, but you lost. And you lost these lopsided. Well, they lost to Georgia 2 years ago by like 3 touchdowns, I think it was. And then they lost to TCU last year, who just got shellacked in the national championship game by Georgia. I don't think that it's, been talked about enough that, yeah, Michigan, okay, you had a couple nice regular seasons. Well, so did Notre Dame in their 2 playoff years, but they got to the playoff and they lost both times. And
You're right.
I don't feel like it's been talked about. And again, the margin of victory against Georgia 2 years ago, not that different from Notre Dame versus Alabama before that. And then, okay, you lost a competitive, somewhat exciting game last year, but your quarterback, who everyone talks about as one of the elite quarterbacks in the country, threw, I think, 3 bad interceptions in that game that led to the loss. And again, the team that beat you went and just got their butts kicked in the championship game by Georgia. So it might have been a competitive semifinal, but the team that beat you was not competitive in the championship game.
Got their doors blown. And my favorite, Twitterizing during the national championship game was from all the Michigan fans. Like, oh, we would have been a better competition. Now you lost to TCU. So, would you have been a better competition? That's like Nick Saban saying, well, we would have been favored against 3 of the 4 teams in the playoff last year.
Right.
It's not, doesn't matter what Vegas says, my man. Like it's what happens on the field, and you had 2 losses. So stop talking.
Yep. Vince, what current coach or player would you most like to see on TV when their career is over? I gave you all day to think about it.
I know you did.
Hope you came up with something good.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be something good, but I've been inundated over the last few days with the Pivot podcast. And I'm sorry, but I think Marcus Freeman would be excellent on TV when it's all said and done. Now, I don't want him to be done anytime soon, but he's the first guy that came to my mind because he's so well-spoken and he's so knowledgeable about the sport. I would love to see him, be an analyst or something someday when he's nice and gray, he's got to put his stamp on Notre Dame for a while.
I thought about, Marcus Freeman would be a good one. And he's got, I think, enough years. It's going to be a while before he has to start worrying about it.
Absolutely.
There's already talk about, would Nick Saban, go to College Game Day when he's done? I don't feel like that would be that enthralling. The guy knows football inside and out. I just don't feel like that would be that good. I just go back to the guy who he's fun on Twitter. He's a smart guy. He's turned around his career over the last, 7-8 years since working for Nick Saban. He looks good in white on the sideline, and he likes a good sneaker, and he's, got a good quip. He's got a dog on Twitter himself. And of course, I'm talking about Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
I think Lane Kiffin would be really good on TV now, again, he's fairly young himself, but I just feel like he'd be a pretty good analyst to have on TV. I think he can have fun with it, but also still give you some good insight and analysis into some things.
I was trying to go through the players and who I would want to see. You know what I mean? The problem is we don't hear enough of the players talking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we hear Notre Dame players talking a little bit more, but finding players from around the country who we've heard, say something to be in TV is a little bit more daunting. You know who I was actually very impressed with from a speaking standpoint, and this is going to kind of come out of nowhere, obviously. But the kicker that Notre Dame got in the transfer portal recently, Schaefer, I believe was his name. The kid from South Florida or Central Florida, whatever.
South Florida, yeah.
South Florida. Thank you very much. And I'm frantically trying to look up his actual name because I want to give the kid credit. But he was able to Spencer Schrader, that's his name, Spencer Schrader from USF. And he actually got up and talked in front of the entire camp that I was at the other day with my son. And he is one of the most well-spoken individuals that I've ever come across in an NCAA, type of situation. And he talked about the fact that the reason he came to Notre Dame is because he wanted to get a master's from the business school and, all these okay. He was very, very well put together and he coached the kids up really, really well. And I think he'd be good at it. I think he'd be really good at it.
Someone who was, again, could talk a little bit and had a good personality and all that stuff. Tyler Newsome, speaking of, punter, remember a few years.
Needed a haircut.
And I think it's tougher for him because it's McAfee was at least an NFL punter and, kind of went that direction after making it in the NFL. It's got to be a little bit tougher, I think, for probably a guy, who was a college punter to try to kind of make a name for himself. But at the same time, podcasts are in right now.
You're not wrong.
Build your following, go with that. So somebody said,
was it Mike Gundy?
Mike Gundy was one. Mike Leach would have been great for TV. I agree with that.
Oh,
Anthony.
Yeah.
Julian Love, John says. That's an interesting one because Julian, now I haven't seen as much of him. I did see a little bit of him on Good Morning Football, I think, a couple of months ago. And
okay,
he was pretty good. But I don't know, if he's done any media training, with New York Giants and stuff like that, if he's done any of the broadcasters boot camp or any of that kind of stuff, but be interesting. Yeah. Good Morning Football, especially this time of year in the off season, they'll get a lot of current players kind of cycle through and, as fill-ins and stuff like that. Like they had Leonard Fournette on last week and that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
College is just tougher to identify because
we just don't hear enough about
the
them.
the bigger your name, the more likely you're going to jump straight to doing some kind of NFL stuff first. If you were, like a Brady Quinn, for example, who got to the NFL but didn't become a star in the NFL, college type stuff has worked out well for him.
Yeah.
So Golick, prime example, again, a guy who made it to the NFL and actually, had a pretty good NFL career, but was not considered a star in the NFL, especially when you had guys like Jerome Brown, Reggie White, and, those kind of guys playing on the defensive line with him. But Golick made a, great media career out of, where he came from, playing for a good team with the Eagles, but not necessarily, again, being a big star. So Quinn Kibler had a couple questions from the mailbag yesterday we didn't get to that I thought would be fun to kind of shoot here today since we're both baseball guys. He said, what baseball ballparks are on your short list of parks to visit?
So here's the sad truth. I've been to two major league ballparks. No, three. I've been to three major league ballparks in my lifetime.
Really?
Both in Chicago and Detroit.
Those would have been my guesses.
Yeah, that's it. So I
knew Wrigley, but
yeah, of course. I am not a well-traveled individual in general. I really wanted to go to a Cincinnati Reds game this past weekend when I was in Cincinnati, but of course they were on the road. It's it seems like anytime I'm someplace that has a major league. Oh, I take it back. I've also been to, I don't even know what it's called anymore, Progressive Field in Cleveland. I was there for the World Series.
Oh yeah, that's right. You went to the World Series.
I went to the game 2 of the World Series. I have been there. That was a kind of pretty cool stadium right in the middle of downtown there. I would love to go to any of them. I would go. I mean, top of the list. I would love to go to Yankee Stadium, but I would rather have gone to the old Yankee Stadium. Obviously, I want to go to the Red Sox. Some of the older ones I would love to see. I've obviously heard that the Milwaukee Brewers Stadium is really nice. I would love to see that one. That one's not that far away. And then just to get out of town, I would love to go see San Diego, that kind of a thing. But I would love to see anything at this point. So I'm open. If anybody wants, to carry me around, I'm in.
I've been to a few more. I've actually been to old Yankee Stadium and new Yankee
Okay.
Stadium. The new one was Pinstripe Bowl. I didn't actually see a baseball game there.
Right.
But I saw Yankees Red Sox 2 nights in a row when we were out there when I was still doing Notre Dame baseball one time. We went and did that. That was pretty cool. Fenway Park is definitely the top of my list. Like Jesse was actually hitting me up. Maybe we can try to make a trip to Fenway before the summer's over. It's like, yeah, that's easy to squeeze in when we've got all this other stuff going on. Let's just go to Fenway.
It's the talk of a 20-something with no other, hey, let's go to West Virginia for a few days. Like, that's so 20-something, right?
Exactly. It's 20-something when you're not yet married and you have no kids, and all you have to do is take the dog,
Yes.
Fenway is definitely it. Want to get it. I've been to Fenway. Did one of those when I went to cover a Notre Dame BC game a few years back. Did one of those. It was obviously off season. Did like a Fenway Park tour, which was kind of cool. But I want to see a game there. And you're right. San Diego would probably be the other one, and then Camden Yards out there in Baltimore.
I've heard that was kind of that one has the reputation of being like the first modern stadium out there. So that would be obviously a cool one.
It's the one that started the whole retro craze there. Back in the 90s. That was the first one built with like the old school bricks and all that different kind of stuff.
Yeah,
for sure. So Quinn also says, which ballpark has better food, Wrigley or Guaranteed Rate?
I mean, I'm gonna go with Wrigley. Now I know this is gonna surprise not you, but maybe it'll surprise other people. I generally don't buy a lot of food at the ballpark because it's too stinking expensive. I buy the big giant thing of peanuts from the grocery store and I take it into the game.
In your dollar bottle of water.
Right. And I'm good to go for the rest of the game. I hate shelling peanuts unless I'm at the ballpark. I love it. Like I have to shell peanuts and keep score at the ballpark.
Yeah. I've never been overly impressed with the food at either one of those ballparks.
There you go.
Actually. And now I think in recent years, Wrigley has gotten a little bit better with some of the renovations. I know they've got like better beer choices and stuff like that for sure. And, and they're doing a little bit more with the food choices. They've never been, like at like up at the top, like we went to San Francisco actually a few years ago and they had like some awesome, like fish tacos and, all this different stuff that you could get out there. Cleveland, where Jesse is, has a pretty good. They've got this nacho bar thing where you can get like it's like a full-sized replica helmet full of your nachos.
Really,
you've got your choice of like chicken or ground beef and beans and like your nacho sauce and pico and all these different. Oh, there's probably like 8 million calories in one helmet.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's all said and done.
I'm just not a fan of like all the crap on nachos. Like that,
really?
They have a nacho bar at our school, and like 50% or more of the kids just get nachos with crap all over their like that's what they eat for lunch every day.
Wow!
And I just
that would be pretty awesome actually to have had nacho bar in high school,
right? Man. And I don't get it. It looks horrible. Then you get soggy nachos. I like my cheese, my nachos. It's a dip and eat. That's where I'm at.
PNC, Josh Buffo, the motivational business, that's Pittsburgh still, right?
Correct.
Like I would like to go there. Actually, I had a chance to go there once a few years back, but it was like one of those games where it was drizzling all night and they played, and I'm like, I don't want to go sit in that, so I didn't go. But yeah, I definitely.
They've got a beautiful skyline.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like that would be cool to see. The cool thing about baseball parks. Is just that they're all different. I mean, you've got the different sizes and that's the coolest part about baseball. And that's why I would love to go to more stadiums and just see the differences and all of that. So it's definitely on my to-do list at some point.
Retirement, right?
Yeah, probably.
Once I get the RV, we'll have to do like like guy weekend trips, hit a couple
Yes.
ballparks, that kind
Speaking
of thing.
of RV, we got to have a talk.
Yeah, the short-term prospects for the RV have not worked
Okay.
out.
All right. I probably figured that since I hadn't heard anything.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm still looking big picture. I mention RV every once in a while to my wife because it's like you got to do something once you end up retiring, right?
You're right. You can't retire anytime soon, though.
And if we're not gonna, no, I mean it's not gonna happen tomorrow. I'm not rich.
Are you hinting at something here?
But what I'm saying is, like, to make the financial planning of the RV work out, you also have to start working on it early enough.
This is true.
That's right. But yeah, it's like if we're not going to buy the lake house or retire in Arlington or whatever, then we got to have the RV so I can do my thing. So
that's great.
All right. Well, before we check out of here tonight, Anthony, thank you so much for the super chat. He said, great interview tonight. Appreciate the show as well. We appreciate you as always, Anthony, and everybody else. And thanks again to Micah Shrewsbury, who kicked us off here tonight for joining us. And if you missed the Micah Shrewsbury interview, of course, you can go back, watch it on YouTube, or you can just wait until the morning and download the podcast. Actually, it'll be up tonight because there was no earlier show today. So all the podcasts from this show go up a little bit earlier than usual. So
nice.
We'll have the Apple or Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, as we like to say. You can find them there. So thanks again. Thanks to Micah Shrewsbury. Thanks Josh Bates over at Notre Dame for connecting us tonight. And doing that, hit the like button on your way out. And of course, subscribe, rate, and review. We will be here tomorrow to finish off the week with a little rapid fire for you on IB Nation Sports Talk.